And we are live. Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. I hope it's as sunny and warm where you are as where I am right now. It's quite lovely. Welcome back to another episode of Mindset Monday, the live show where we help you improve your mindset, grow your business, and just have a great week. I'm your host, Hayden Humphrey, uplifter and mindset coach. And with me today is a dear friend of mine, super talented coach, all around, just amazing, awesome human being, Tou Ger Lee. Tou, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for those kind words already. I feel like you might be hyping me up a little bit more than necessary here.
No such thing. No such thing. For those watching who haven't had the opportunity to meet you just yet, will you share with us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a personal and professional development coach. At the moment, I work with a lot of big tech companies such as Google, Meta, Netflix, Tesla, working with professionals from these companies on how to find some more professional and personal fulfillment in their lives. So this could be in their relationships, this could be in their career satisfaction, this could be with grief and loss of a loved one. The topics vary, but really just working with professionals on how to create more fulfilling lives overall. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm sure we'll dive in a bit more into that area.
That's great. And it's so important, that conversation of fulfillment. Because I think in so many ways, like that's ultimately the thing that really everybody's looking for and searching for. And, at least in part, when I think about my own journey, that's part of what really attracted me to the idea of being self-employed and starting a business. And, even more specifically working as a coach, was thinking about like, what would be the most fulfilling way for me to spend my time and spend my life. And I would imagine for a lot of the folks who are listening and just a lot of solopreneurs and small business owners, fulfillment is a huge element around why they do what they do. Because building a business, being self-employed is not easy. But it's a conversation around what makes it worth it. And I think that conversation around fulfillment, understanding how to create more fulfillment is a super relevant and important element of that conversation. So the question that I've been kicking us off with too, and the same question that I will ask you is, what is a mindset shift you have created recently, and what impact has it had on your business?
Yeah, so a mindset, and I feel like I'm always changing mindsets, right? Especially being in this industry as a coach, always growing every single day. But one that's been constant for me recently has been identifying the little stories, the little narratives that happen. So what I mean by this is I actually first noticed it with sleep. Anybody who knows me will know that I've struggled with sleep for the majority of my life. And it's become a habit of mine to answer, how are you with I'm tired. And so what it just kind of happened one morning. I woke up and I just kind of realized, hey, I'm tired is a story. And really objectively, if we're looking at what's going on is, of course, when you don't get as high quality of sleep, there's no denying that maybe your brain gets a little more foggy, you feel a little more lethargic, maybe you're a little more clumsy. But these are all objective and tangible and things that are actually happening. But what I would do, and what a lot of people would do, is be like, oh, I only got 4 hours of sleep. I'm going to have the most terrible day. It's going to be crap already. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, and I'm tired becomes a story that people live into, where because people say I'm tired, they start feeling tired. They start making, it's like you start believing this narrative that makes it worse than it really is. And so again, there's no denying that getting, let's say, 4 hours of sleep will have impact on you. But being objective about what that impact is, rather than just living in the narrative of I'm tired, has made a significant difference for me. And of course, using this in other areas of my life as well. So instead of, I am really I don't know, like, I'm just feeling really frustrated right now. Being more objective with, hey, I noticed my heart's beating a little faster. I noticed that I'm thinking a little faster
Mm,
because I want to, I want to feel more heard. I'm noticing that
mm,
I'm feeling kind of hot.
mm,
These things have also helped me with emotional regulation, which I'm sure I don't have to explain to you or anyone else how important that is in not just business but in life. Yeah, so that's a mindset shift that I've been really tapping into, noticing the little narratives, the little stories that show up that most of us don't even take a
mm.
second to question or to bat our eyes at, and actually questioning myself there of looking at what's actually objectively going on. Um, so the way that this has helped me in business particularly is I'm actually in business with my wife. She's a therapist,
Mhm.
I'm a coach, so we have our own private practice together. And for anyone who is has ever worked with a romantic partner, you can see how challenging that can be in a lot of ways.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because you really quite literally are mixing up, professional and personal life together. Um, and the way that that's really just been able to support us is being able to look at each other and say, okay, objectively, what are we feeling towards each other? Objectively, what are we feeling anxious about? And what does that even mean? Rather than just saying, I'm feeling anxious, what are the things that are coming up? And when we
Mm.
can view it that way, it's amazing because it just helps us to identify the clear point that we're looking at rather than muddling everything up. Um, so as I'm saying this, I actually want to create an image here, and I'm going to rely on you to let me know if you can see this, Hayden.
Okay.
Um, can you see this little dot that I just drew here?
Yes.
Yeah. So oftentimes this is the issue that happens, right? Like that's the issue.
Mm.
It's no denying that that exists. It's there. But what we do with the stories and the narratives is we kind of like do this thing where we screw it up a little bit more, and then now we have this whole thing to resolve. And so by
Mhm.
being able to just say, okay, objectively, this is the thing that's going on. I just drew an arrow. Sorry, you can't really
Mm.
see that on the camera. But
Mm.
objectively, this
Mm.
dot is what's going on. It helps to just navigate through that a lot more clearly. And so a
Mm.
tangible way that this actually, like, just to give you, a little insider into my life and how this helped with business with my wife is we were sitting down having a business meeting about some of the things that we wanted to work through. And again, just spilling the tea on myself a little bit here, like, we got into a bit of a heavy debate, and it got a little personal about some of the other things in our lives because it just happens.
Mm.
um, and when we were able to pull ourselves back and say, okay, objectively, I'm noticing that these are the symptoms that I'm feeling in my body. I'm noticing that objectively, this is what you said, and this is how I interpreted it. That
Mm.
allowed us to really come back together to say, okay, I think we're actually talking about the same thing. We're actually talking
Mm.
about the same thing. How do you want to navigate through that? Okay, cool. And then we were able to, play back and forth on that and actually support each other to come up with a really good solution. And so, yeah, just wanted to share an example of how that has directly supported me
Mm.
there. But let me flip this
Mm.
back over to you, Hayden. What are your thoughts?
Well, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And yeah, it's so interesting. I think how we as people we're meaning making machines, and
Hmm.
the thing that we really love doing is creating stories. We really,
Hmm.
really, really, actually, I'll say our brain really, really, really loves creating stories to try and make sense of what's happening. And I find that oftentimes, more often than not, the story that we are creating is in some ways protective. There's a fear, there's an insecurity that gets triggered. And so we come up with a story to try and protect ourselves, protect our emotions, protect our identity, protect our psyche, whatever it is. And the interesting thing about it is there's not really a very good opportunity for insight or a very good opportunity for true change when we're creating stories from that place, what you might consider a more reactive sort of
Yes.
place. And so I think it's so valuable what you shared in the conversation around bringing more awareness to and simply being in the practice of noticing the stories that you are telling yourself about what's happening, especially with circumstances and situations that don't feel very good. I feel tired. I don't like this. I don't like that. The example that you shared at the end around the conversation that you've been having with your wife, I imagine some things came up there as well. So bringing more awareness to, bringing more thought and consideration to the stories that you are telling yourself, and then being in a conversation around, is this supportive? And if not, really what's at the core of this? And falling back on, what are the more objective things that I can notice about my current state, my emotional state, how my body feels, the thoughts that I notice that are running through my head, which creates an opportunity to then act differently in the future. So if you're aware that you constantly tell yourself that you're tired, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you become aware of it, you can then create a different experience in the future, which is you don't participate in that story as much. And maybe you have less energy, but there's no story or drama around it. You're just simply doing the best, showing up optimally for whatever state you're in during the day. Same thing in having a conversation, building a relationship, building a business with a significant other. Being aware of, being cognizant of, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves about what's happening right now? Can we bring some awareness to it? Look at what are my patterns? What are the stories that are happening? So that we can create a different experience and a different set of actions in the future. And that is huge and so valuable. I really appreciate you sharing all that. That's really cool.
Yeah. And I love the word that you use here, future, right? You use that word quite a bit here. And actually, I use this a lot to, build on top of that. I always like to say where we are right now is the foundation of what we build our futures on top of. But it does have to start with right now, right here with what we have. And I think anyone would agree that the foundation is the most important piece of building any dream that we have. But so many of us screw up our own foundation with these narratives, with these stories. If you wake up and the first narrative is, I'm tired and I'm like gonna have a terrible day now because I only got 4 hours of sleep and I woke up in the middle of the night and because of you've already screwed up your foundation for that day. And no matter the idea or the concept of I'm tired, I didn't get enough sleep, I whatever. And so many people are only thinking about what the next step is, and I think naturally as ambitious individuals, we're always looking at what's next, what's next, not realizing like, okay, let's actually pay attention to where we currently are now first, because what's next is really built off of where we currently are. Yeah. So that's, and I don't think we put enough weight to that.
No, it's so funny. Earlier, I was just thinking about this earlier today about how often we keep ourselves trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction and not feeling fulfilled by not slowing down, by avoiding the act in the process of slowing down. And by not slowing down, we keep ourselves stuck in these cycles. We keep ourselves stuck in these patterns. We keep ourselves stuck in this place. Because in order to really get at the core, like the core issue and what's creating the problems that you're experiencing, which is how you think about it, how you think about yourself, how you think about the world, in order to actually be in a place to recognize and change those, you have to slow all the way down. You have to slow down and develop a more grounded, sober level of awareness around what's happening. And to use your word you said earlier, the little stories, these little sort of like subtle stories that sort of either live in our subconscious or like right at the edge of our subconscious, that unless we are in a calm, centered, grounded, sober state, we are unable to recognize. And we live in a culture, I think, that's very hyper-focused on productivity and it's hyper-focused on effort. And so often when something isn't going the way that we want it to, our reaction to it is, I'll do more. I'm going to do more. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to put in more effort to try and change the situation and to try and, change this thing, whatever it is. But I love the example or the way that you talked about it. If the foundation is misaligned, if the foundation isn't the way that you'd like it to be, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how tall you build the skyscraper, because the foundation is off kilter. It's off center. It's cracked. It's misaligned. So how cool to be actively looking at and noticing those really core stories and those really core narratives, because once you're aware of it, you can then be in a conversation around, how do I want to change this now so that the future version of me has an easier time and is living a life that feels better.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid to slow down because it's the thought of slowing down, or it's the thought of like, we're not moving fast enough forward, and we just kind of want to do kind of what you mentioned earlier. We just want to move and be effective and be in motion. It makes me think about when I first moved into my condo here with my wife. We bought this condo. It wasn't a great place, so we had to do a ton of renovations on it. And at one point, our sink, I realized that under our sink there was a leak, and so I called our contractor guy, and he came over and he was like, okay, I think I know exactly what's going on. And we went to Home Depot. We bought all these pipes. We, changed all these things. It's like, you should be good now. Next morning, I wake up, there's still a leak. And I'm like, hey, like, we just spent hundreds of dollars on all of this and lots of extra labor. Like, why is it still leaking? And he comes over and he's like, oh, it might be the dishwasher thing. And so we start working on the dishwasher, like, lines and, the whole shebang. Next morning, it's still happening. And so I'm getting kind of frustrated at this point because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money that's going into this. And I'm like, hey, seriously, what's going on? Like, why isn't this fixed? We then realized that the leak was coming from the side where, how you have the soap dispenser in the counter? It simply wasn't twisted on tightly. And so water was getting through that and leaking in. And both of us were just too impatient to actually look at what the problem was. It was just, there's a leak. Okay, this must be it. If we change this, that's probably going to be the solution. We were so quick to looking for solutions that we didn't even sit down to be like, okay, what's actually going on? Yeah. And if we would have just taken we'll call it 15 minutes to figure out what was going on, that could have saved us hours of time and stress and annoyance and tons of money. So sometimes you don't want to take those 10 to 15 minutes not realizing that it's actually costing us a lot more.
Wow, what a great story. Thanks for sharing that story. I love that story. I love that story so much. And it's like so real. It's so indicative. It's so analogous to like how many things in life go the way that they go, and how, I think part of it actually is that we're often conditioned to focus on the symptoms, and we're then not taught how to identify and address the actual root cause. I think about this a lot it's like a campfire, and we're trying to address the smoke and get rid of the smoke because the smoke's bothering us, instead of addressing like what's the actual core root problem.
Yeah.
In order to do that, you have to be willing to slow down and to take it a step at a time, and to be really honest and real with yourself about what is the current state of things. Where might I not be looking? Where might I not be taking responsibility for something? And I think, it's interesting to notice the proclivity that we have towards busyness, because I think in some ways busyness is a distraction. Busyness is a numbing agent. We actually don't have to do like the scary, hard, humbling work if we're constantly in this state of go, 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 go. I just got to do more. I just got to do more. I just got to do more. Because it's challenging. It's hard to look at, in some senses, right? The story that you just told, we spent all this money, we spent all this time, we spent all this energy trying to fix this problem, only to realize it was actually a really simple, like very simple thing. And it requires a level of humility, and a willingness to say, oh, okay, I see how my unwillingness to slow down and just take it with the basics, just take it a step at a time, created this much larger thing. And I think it's a pattern that so many of us get caught in. We like to stay busy because then we don't have to really have the hard conversations with ourselves about what's working or what's not working.
Yeah. And this is maybe kind of moving off into a different conversation here, but the word you use, busy, is making me think about a book that I was reading last night around the idea of busy. And this is an incomplete thought. We'll take it wherever it goes, and the audience can take what they will out of it. But what the book essentially said was, people get busy out of grief. So for what you'll realize is when people lose a loved one, what they'll do is they'll get busy. They'll drown themselves in work or with even funeral plannings or whatever it is. Right? But people get busy when people grieve the loss of a long-term relationship or just a romantic relationship. They get busy with hooking up. They get busy with like, I'm gonna fully dive myself into my work now or whatever it is. So busyness is really a way for people to cope with grief. And so I started then wondering or pondering on, all of these busy people, are they all grieving something? And is it possible that everyone's grieving a loss, like almost like a lost dream or a loss, like I'm grieving this expectation that I had that didn't happen. So just again, incomplete thought, but I love to throw that over to you and like, let's just juggle that around.
Got goosebumps. I've got goosebumps. What a powerful thought. What a powerful thought. Because I think it in many ways, it speaks to this really sort of like core pattern that might be playing out for people. And as you were talking, the words that I wrote down were loss of authentic self and loss of self-acceptance.
Curious,
I think
why those
about,
words?
Well, I think about the experience that we have as kids. And often, I think for many, many people, there's this experience of loss because there is a way that we feel called to act naturally and authentically. And because of the family we grow up in, because of the dynamic, because of the culture, because of the situations that we grow up in, oftentimes that authentic expression is stunted, even ridiculed or threatened, attacked, even in some circumstances, in some cases. So I can imagine that for folks who end up, I would definitely put myself in this category too, who have had that experience of growing up in a household, in a family, in a set of circumstances that didn't allow for that authentic self-expression, there is this undercurrent of grief. Because there's this knowing, whether it's conscious or not, there's this knowing of how life can look different, and the not being self, like the not being authentic, the not being true, the not being honest, and true to who you are as a person. So I can imagine that for a lot of people, again, definitely would put myself in this category. Busyness is a way to avoid dealing with the grief around the loss of our authentic self.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your take on, if you're working with somebody who, because the authentic self, I feel like it takes a lot of work to identify that there's something missing there, right? A lot of people will have a hard time, I don't know if the word admitting is correct, or a lot of people have a hard time identifying with that simply because they haven't done the work to even know what the authentic self means. So for those who are just getting started in this work of personal development or learning more about mindset shifting, how would you make that transition for them in terms of, I guess, having this conversation?
What a great question. I thank you for asking that question. The place that I always start with people is some variation of the question, how do you know when you want something? How do you know when you want something? And it's a question I find often people have never considered before. They've never asked themselves that question before. So there's an element of having to sit and think about it. And the idea with it is inviting more awareness around what desire feels like, what true desire feels like, what true yearning feels like. Because to me, that is an expression of the authentic self, like heart-led, heart-centered desire, heart-centered yearning is really, I think, the path to the most authentic version and experience of ourselves. So this question of how do you know when you want something, and then creating a space where, and creating, offering reflections, invitations for people to get really tapped into their body. Because I have really come to recognize that our brain is where all the conditioning lives, but our heart remains untouched. Our heart remains pure. Our heart is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not conditionable. It's naturally resistant to conditioning. It's pure. It's pure. So starting to develop an awareness, a more acute awareness around what your heart feels like, what it has to say, how it leads you, what it's leading you towards, what it's calling you towards. And to me, that's in many ways a physical process. So it's inviting people to really sit with themselves, create the space to sit with themselves and to notice when you think about something that you want, how does it feel? How does that physically feel in your body? Because oftentimes for a lot of people, I'd say for everybody really, there is a physical reaction that we have to things that we want and things that we don't want. So starting to learn the language of the body, starting to learn the language of the heart, developing a more acute awareness of what it feels like to want something and what your heart is telling you. That to me is the beginning and entrance to developing a deeper relationship with your more authentic self.
Yeah. So I love that, like the use of understanding like somatically what's going on. Yeah. And I'm pondering on this right now because it's the thing you mentioned around the brain is where a lot of the conditionings happen. And yeah, that's absolutely right. I feel like so many of us rely on the brain to try to make decisions, and perhaps the somatic experience of it is the intuition part, right? Like we feel pulled towards it, and many people don't exercise that anymore. So I love that that's the approach that you take of like, what does it actually feel like in your body when you truly desire something, and how do you actually listen to that piece?
Totally. Because in doing that, you can then gain distance from the conditioning. You can gain distance from the brain. You can start to separate yourself from the stories and the scripts and the narratives that so often we're identified with, because we have grown up in the culture that we've grown up in, and because we've had the life experiences that we've had, we are identified with these cultural stories. And often so many of these stories are not positive. They're not positive stories. They're not loving stories. They're not graceful stories. Often they're based in not feeling enough, feeling like you're too much, like really the underlying idea that something is wrong with you. Yeah. And this practice of understanding and connecting, more deeply with your physical body and your heart, I think allows for a space to open up where you can start to really more intentionally question these stories and question whether or not, this is how you want to live your life. And, these are the things that you want to do. And I think, a thought that occurred to me as you were talking was like, the interesting thing about mindset work, I think, is that mindset work is sort of an introduction or a doorway to real fulfillment. But the idea with mindset work is not to stay in mindset work forever. Like actually the idea with mindset work is to use mindset work to transcend the mind, literally to create separation from, to notice what is you and what isn't actually you. And that is a really, I think, challenging, but like the most rewarding sort of journey that you can go on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so it's so meta. It's like I love it. They're using mindset work to actually transcend the mind. Yeah. Totally. You're gonna have to ponder on that for a little bit, man.
Yeah, we'll have to we'll have to keep talking about it. Well, Man, amazing conversation, as expected, totally as expected. For the folks who haven't connected with you, maybe haven't met you yet, how can people find you? How can people work with you?
Yeah. So my website is thegoodlifementalhealth.com. You can find me there. I am also, you can find me on Instagram, on Facebook under this name, Tou Ger Lee. There are only a few of me in the world, so you shouldn't have too hard of a time finding me. Yes, you can connect with me there. LinkedIn is also a good place to connect with me as well. Um,
Mm,
yeah, now we'll have to chat and see how I could support anyone or everyone, and see how I can just kind of connect with people.
that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
And if you are watching the show and you enjoyed the show and you want to go deeper with mindset work, really truly becoming the creator of your own life, I would encourage you to subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, aptly named Unscript Your Life. Every week, I share tips, tricks, strategies, stories to help you break out of the scripts and stories keeping you stuck and to get more of what you want. You can find the link to subscribe on my profile or in the comment section of this live stream. Any final thoughts, comments, words of wisdom?
Uh, don't take life so seriously. Have some fun.
That is a great idea. That was actually my senior quote in my senior year high school yearbook was, don't take life too seriously. Nobody gets out alive anyways.
Oh,
And real.
yeah.
So real.
Have
I
some
think,
fun.
I think all of us would benefit from a lighter, gentler relationship with ourselves and with life. So I appreciate you sharing that, and super appreciate you being here too. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me,
thank you
brother.
everyone who's totally, absolutely. Thanks to everybody who's been watching today and folks who are watching the recording. Too, I hope you have an amazing rest of your Monday and rest of your week. Everybody who's watching, I will see you back here next Monday, same time, same place. Bye, everybody.
See ya.